The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets about what matters most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Our mind can't actually capture all of the implications. But this is true about creating anything, right? Like when it leaves your hands, you don't know what will happen to it, which is beautiful and humbling.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Maria Bowler is a writer, coach, and retreat leader. She describes her work as nourishing imaginative souls so they can make new worlds. Her new book is Making Time, a new vision for crafting a life beyond productivity. In this episode, Maria and I discuss making the shift from a producer mindset to a creator mindset and from hustle to deep effort. We also talk about collaborating with reality. Maria Bowler, I'm so happy to have you on the Habit Podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
And I am excited about your book, Making Time, a new vision for crafting a life beyond productivity. So thanks for writing it. I really got a lot out of it. How do you summarize when people ask you what your book's about? What do you tell them? What's your sort of 90-second summary?
I like to say that it's about the difference between productivity and creativity, because I think that we have skewed perceptions of both of those things. And we often, if we are creative people, we think we need to be more productive. Mm-hmm. And my argument is that these are two different states of being. And if we are seeing ourselves as producers, we're more likely going to be getting in our own way. So my argument is to shift our identity from being producers to being creators is what actually allows us to engage in the world in the way that we really want to.
Well, can you tell me what the difference is between a producer and a creator?
Yeah, well, there's a bit of a historical backstory that I think gives it context. So during the Industrial Revolution, we can really see that our way of engaging in getting stuff done became scientifically managed. Mm-hmm. And so there was this idea that you could break down projects into tiny parts and optimize them, and then everything would be great. Society would work better. And this way of operating didn't stay in the factory. It infiltrated every corner of our life, from our family life to our churches, and certainly to our spiritual life. And I think the real difference is that there is this idea that we are managers alienated from our tasks, and it is our job to isolate and optimize our lives.
Yeah.
we often don't see how pervasive this is until we run up against the limits of it, which is the sense of like, wait a minute, why can't I optimize my day? Why do I feel like I'm constantly just one tweak away from getting to where I want to go? Yeah. That, I believe, is the producer's mindset, and it is one that's essentially kind of alienates us from ourselves and from the world.
Yeah. One thing I'm really, so you're using the word alienation. Mm-hmm. I love the insight that you have, or the language you use about collaborating with reality. Mm-hmm. What do you mean when you talk about collaborating with reality? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Sometimes I think it's most helpful to think of it in contrast. I think it's the opposite of controlling.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of believing that you are separate from everything that's around you. We think about it like a personal relationship, with a friend or an intimate partner. You know what it's like to collaborate with them versus try to manage them. We've all tried.
Yeah.
But we also know what it's like to go back and forth with a person, to be in relationship with them, to make things happen alongside and with them. So I believe that is not different from any other corner of our life. We can collaborate with our own process. We can collaborate with the stuff that comes across our desk that seems like a problem that we need to solve. The question is, are we thinking of ourselves as someone whose job it is to manage and fix, or are we seeing ourselves as someone who is already in relationship to what is happening?
Can you give an example of a situation in which those two different ways of thinking are different?
Yeah. Sometimes I think the place it shows up the most is actually in us with our own resistance. So if you've ever felt like you had writer's block, that might be a place to look.
Every day.
Right?
Yeah.
If we think of our job as a producer, a writer's block, any resistance we feel becomes a problem that we have to play whack-a-mole with.
Yeah.
And so, okay, we go into our strategy brain. We're like, okay, so how am I going to get around this? Maybe I can tweak my schedule to not experience this. Maybe I can analyze what's wrong with me that I'm having this problem. We are in opposition to an internal state, which I think happens a lot in the writing process.
Yeah.
If we are collaborators, all of a sudden, this thing we're experiencing, whether it's a kind of a blank brain or just a sense of like, ugh, I don't really want to do this today. Now we can be a lot more curious about it. Not from a place of trying to fix it, but like, oh, what is this? Maybe this is for me. Maybe it's simply telling me something very simple like, all right, you just didn't get enough sleep last night. Or maybe it's saying, there's actually something amiss in this project, and you know it, and let's kind of get closer to what you know, and be sort of gentle and curious about it. Maybe there's something that you are experiencing outside the page that has informed this project that you're trying to keep away. Like maybe you're different than who you were when you started this project.
Yeah.
And your body knows it, right?
Yeah. When you talk about productivity and being geared toward the end result, I've been thinking a lot lately about artificial intelligence, which skips the process. Like you're talking about being in a relationship with the process, and AI says you don't have to have a process, right? You can just have the product without the process, and we this is the way we tend to think already, and I think AI makes us more inclined to believe that the process is a problem to be solved, and we don't have to. But that's where all the good work that happens in you happens in the process. And I find it hard to believe that a robot can produce a better end result than a
Yes.
writer who's engaged with the process.
Right. I think the question is to any writer is, do you actually want the book to be finished, or do you want to become the person who wrote the book?
Yeah.
And you have to go through the process, because I think our real desire is becoming. Is
Yes.
deep engagement all the time, because we would feel satisfied with just like boop, 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 pressing buttons if that desire wasn't there.
Yeah.
But our lack of satisfaction, our lack of like this feeling of alienation occurs to tell us, wait, that isn't even what you wanted in the first place. Yes, the result is nice, but you wanted your own becoming. You wanted wholeness. Like, we're all geared to seek that anyway, and that involves going through and not around.
Yeah. That's so good. Thank you for that. You suggest at one point that maybe we should connect to the idea that the good, the true, and the beautiful arises from whatever is unfolding now, which seems to be a very that's an act of faith to say that whatever is unfolding now, there's goodness, truth, and beauty to connect with in it. And this seems relevant to what you're saying about collaborating with reality.
Yes.
That assumes that reality consists of goodness, truth, and beauty.
Absolutely. And it just is. And everything that seems like it's in our way and that we want to pick an argument with simply exists. And that sounds really lofty, but I'm thrown back to this place I was in when I started conceiving this book, which was cradling a colicky newborn as COVID was beginning in April 2020. Now, everything in me said, this is horrible. I would love for this not to be happening. And of course, I wouldn't wish that experience of alienation on anybody. Sure. And you could come up with more or less extreme examples of that. And yet, it was what was happening. And this force of life in this baby who was crying was trying to say, can you be with me? And it wasn't as though what was happening was so wonderful, but that my relationship to it was what allowed for goodness and truth and beauty. My ability to simply acknowledge it and be with it, that is where it emerged, even though it was certainly something I wouldn't have chosen.
Yeah. I mean, it's an invitation to align with reality. I mean, we always have an invitation to align with reality. And then we also always have the temptation to argue with reality. Reality always wins that argument, ultimately.
Doesn't
it? Which is not the same, and I think it's important to distinguish between the reality and the status quo.
Yep. Reality is simply what's happening, and our opinions about it and our judgments that this should be happening is the status quo. Yeah.
And reality is that which continues to exist whether you believe in it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay. You used the phrase "it just is," which reminds me of something else that you talk about. You talk about the importance of being human, rather than insisting on doing. And this is a remarkable statement. You said there's no such thing as doing nothing. because there's no such thing as being nothing. And then you go on to say, the quality of being trumps your actions every time, which sounds like something Thomas Aquinas would say. So
Yep.
I want to hear more about that.
Yep.
What are some of the implications of that truth?
Yeah.
If it's true, what difference does that make? This idea that being trumps doing.
It's so hard to apply this to ourselves, but I think that it becomes obvious when we apply it to other people. Isn't it true that we love our friends because of how they are being and not because they're doing the right things?
Yeah.
Because they drove
That's
us to
good.
the airport, right? We love our pets because of their quality of presence and their being. It's obvious to us when we can see it in other people and we just somehow delete it from our own self-perception. If you've ever received a gift from somebody that was given out of a sense of obligation and of bitterness, the experience of that gift, even if it was quote unquote the right thing, right, that they should have gotten, the experience of that gift is not the same as one that maybe you wouldn't expect it. You're thinking, why are they giving it to me? But you can feel their connection to you and to the process of getting it for you. So we already know from experience that this is true, but it feels so scary to trust that our presence, our heart is that powerful. Oh gosh, like, you mean my showing up fully matters to whatever it is I'm doing? I can't strategize my way around that.
Yeah.
Why
do you reckon that's so hard to accept?
Oh, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that sometimes it's easier to believe that we are not as powerful as we are, or that we are only powerful and creative in safe ways that we have learned to control. Like, I am good and worth showing up because I know how to make people happy at the meeting, and that's what makes me valuable. That feels controllable. But it's actually very vulnerable to our capacity to experience our own capacity to create by simply showing up fully. Is like, whoa, what's that? I mean, the way you phrase the question, it's exactly it. Like, what are the implications of that? I think it makes our minds spin a little bit. And I think that's why it's so hard, is because our mind can't actually capture all of the implications. But this is true about creating anything, right? Like, when it leaves your hands, you don't know what will happen to it, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
And humbling.
Yeah. And when you raise kids, for instance.
Oh my goodness.
They go and do stuff that you are not in control of.
The most humbling. Most, right?
But also, you also reach a point, and I don't think you're there yet in terms of how old your child is, but one day your kids start doing things that you couldn't possibly do. And that you couldn't have taught them to do, and that's pretty great too.
Truly, it's really amazing. I mean, and I believe that's true for even the things we do on purpose, like for even the things we put out there in the world, that they plant seeds in places that we could not have anticipated, that are better than we could have thought.
Yeah. And I mean, it's been my experience that to speak in public, for instance, whatever my note said, what I get comments on or what gets tweeted or whatever is something that wasn't in my notes. And maybe I didn't even say it, right? Because people are receiving what they're receiving is not necessarily what you're putting out there, but also just kind of what in the moment as one is present in the speaking or in the writing or in whatever. It's that there's something that happens that again, it has to do with being present. That's so much more important than what I was planning to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I also said what I was planning to say, but it's
Mm-hmm.
always the little offhand remark that turns out to be it's humbling and also incredibly encouraging.
Right. Because it was what happened came from a relationship between you and reality. You
Yes.
showed up.
Yeah. That's right. And I do think that preparing is a kind of alienation. Again, I'm all for preparation. I should probably
Yeah.
prepare more for all the things that I enter into. And yet, there is, when you are preparing ahead of time, by definition, you are not present with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what we're just talking. I don't know what the implication of all that is, but I'd never
Mm-hmm.
thought about the truth that by definition, preparing ahead of time, completely necessary, and
Mm-hmm.
also a little built-in alienation from
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah. It's this tricky dynamic between structure and flow. It's not that we don't need anything kind of hard to bump against, whether it's a
Mhm.
note or, a time limit. But if we think that our structure is the thing that gets things done, we're going to start feeling alienated. It's just the thing that supports.
Yeah. Good things, and you're going to have to help me with this because I'm paraphrasing you. Good things happen through us, not because of us. Uh,
Yes, yes. I can't remember the exact words either, but so I think that has big implications. If we believe that we are mud wrestling our project into submission just by ourselves, it's going to be a lot of effort. We can totally do it. But if we believe that I'm the one making this happen, there was that like self-help book in the 90s. If it's to be, it's up to me.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Yeah.
it's all my power. It's all my personal power. And like I said, we've gotten things done in our life that way, probably,
Mhm.
or at least it seemed that way.
Yeah, right.
Right. I don't know if that was ever fully true, but
Yeah.
But what if we see ourselves as participants, active participants, not passive
Hmm.
participants in bringing things through? Then suddenly maybe it doesn't have to be so forceful to make things happen.
Yeah, my experience has been that you can force things and it works until it doesn't work.
Exactly.
And then when it doesn't work, it does not work.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like a brick wall.
Yeah. And as I often say, only God can make a tomato. Right? I can plant tomatoes, I can weed, there's some things I can do, but I can't make a tomato.
Oh, it's beautiful. That's so real.
Okay. All right. I got to ask you about something else. You said that I don't know what to make of it. I'm just going to quote you here. For a maker, deep effort is fun when you believe that you have already created the result you want. It's only temporarily invisible. That seems like kind of a wacky thing to say. The thing I want to make is already made, and it's just invisible. And could you put that in terms that I can make sense of?
Sure. I mean, the word create came into being was used as a verb in the Middle Ages, but at first it only applied to what God has already done. So when we start hearing it in English, it was creare. It was God has created such and such. So it's like it's already completed in some divine capacity. And then as time progressed and it began to be tentatively applied to humans. Oh, humans can create this too. And I believe that there is something in that sense of already completedness that allows us to have trust in the process, that it existed in our impulse to do it.
Okay.
in some I don't know the mechanics of it. I don't know whether it's, capital T true. But I know that the implications of behaving that way are more fruitful
Okay.
than believing that this thing won't exist unless I make it happen. I
Okay.
also like to compare it to a person in labor. The baby is complete.
Okay. Yeah.
The contractions are happening. There's no denying it. It's there's no forcing it to happen. You can just participate in the labor process
Yeah.
however you want. And I think that we experience sometimes our impulse to create something as a kind of contraction and as a kind of like, oh, this is possible. And I believe that that's kind of a sign that, like, oh, we're already in some kind of creation process that is maybe akin to labor.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that create even the creation that God does is still ongoing, and we can
Yes.
jump in on that in some ways. I mean, I don't want to get. I may get heretical here in about.
It can get very yeah.
Yeah, but and maybe some of this is related to, was it? I get Michelangelo and Da Vinci mixed up, but one of them talked about the idea that the statue is already in the block, and I'm just cutting away everything that's not the statue.
Yes, that is Michelangelo, and at least attributed to him. I don't know if I actually know.
Right. Sure.
Yeah, it might be one of those apocryphal things.
Sure.
But that made me. That made me think about how, if that is true, it could be because we have an intuition of something true in the world, and we're simply cooperating with giving it form.
Yeah.
Oh, I intuit something that is true. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. That's good. Okay. All right. You talk about the idea of deep effort. Effort, yes. How's that different from hard work, hustle?
Yes. I think hard work is also fair.
That's fair.
To call it that.
That's a decent synonym.
Yeah, I hesitated to use that term because it's so connected with our experience of forcing it, though it doesn't have to be. Like I use the word hustle to sort of delineate between the two. And to me, the experience, again, is distinguished by the level of trust and participation. In hustling, when we're hustling, we're believing that we're trying to outrun a negative outcome, usually.
Yeah.
We're feeling this gap between where we are and where we should be, and we're trying to make up that gap as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And we're often motivated by a fear that we're not going to close that gap.
Exactly. Because, exactly. There's something at stake, and it's us.
Wow.
Because if we are what we do, and the thing is undone, especially when it's the work of the heart, that's something we really want to do. The experience of it being undone can be terrifying. And so we just try to outrun that feeling.
Yeah.
That is the experience of hustling. Deep effort is just part of nature. It's, how a seed needs to break through soil. It's how our muscles need to be pushed against things or they'll atrophy. I mean, that is normal. Again, I think childbirth is a decent analogy. Again, contraction happens. Contraction's part of it.
Yeah.
But how we experience that contraction is very different. If we are engaging with it as not a problem, but as part of the process, we are in relationship to some piece of struggle. We're with it. That is effort. Or you might think of it as sitting across from a person and you're deeply engaged with what is happening to them. And maybe it's very painful what's happening to them. That is effortful, but you're engaged. It's so different than trying to frantically fix something in front of you.
Yeah.
On the surface, it might look the same. It might look like door closed in your room for 3 hours, but the experience of it will be different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciated something you said about hustle. You said it's again, I'm paraphrasing, doing the best I can here. You can help me. It's this frantic effort to earn that which is our birthright.
Mm,
Did I get that right? Or close enough?
yes. Yes. So let's say you have a novel in you and you really want to write it, but you believe that you are not the person who can write the novel until it's done. That every day that it's not finished, you're like, oh, I will not be an author until it's done. Every day that it's not done, you feel that sense of like, I haven't earned it yet.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're already a maker, you're just choosing to engage in this project.
Yeah.
You are no longer having to outrun the sense of like, oh, I have to earn this identity of someone who participates in the thing that I really deeply long to participate in.
I wonder if that also, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Mary.
No, go ahead.
We're also in that process tempted to rush to the end so that I can be done and be an author.
Yeah.
And so the work isn't as good as it ought to be.
Ooh, that's a great point. Yep. I mean, it feels like a threat to not be done.
Huh.
In that state.
Yeah.
But that would be like when you're dating someone and every day that you're not married, it's a problem. Like, oh, the relationship isn't real because you're not married yet.
Yeah. And I guess the flip side of that is we got married because being engaged wasn't working out.
Well, that would go.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. You draw a distinction between intention and goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's the difference?
Yeah. Intention is a way of being that you can control or connect to, and a goal is just the end result. So when you think your AI example is great, you can absolutely meet a goal through. You could meet a goal through copy and pasting. You could meet a goal any way you wanted.
Plagiarism. That's another good way to
yes.
to meet your goal. Yeah.
Right. And that's, to use those extreme examples, goals are not wrong. It's just a concrete thing. But if you finished something, if you met your goal without the intention that was actually fueling your goal, you would feel something was off. Mm-hmm. There would be a reason why you wouldn't be satisfied with a book you didn't really write. So that just, okay, that's your intention. So now we can ask a different set of questions. What would it be worth engaging with regardless of the outcome? What is it about this project that is worth engaging with?
Okay.
What is it that is truly making this worth my time? And it could be my imagination senses that there's something really true here that I need to connect with. That is your intention. And the great thing about distinguishing between goals and intentions is that you can experience your intention the whole way. You don't have to wait until you're done.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. I found it helpful. An example you gave was you said your local coffee shop, their intention is hospitality or something along the, I can't remember what you said, but it's, and they may have goals, they may have revenue goals. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good for them. That's fine. They better. If they want to continue being hospitable, they need to have some revenue goals that they meet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example. And they can control how welcoming they are. They can't control how many people come through the door.
Yeah.
They also can't control how I feel welcomed. They can just control how they're showing up.
Okay, so we need to talk about this though, because
Mhm.
we started out talking about being a maker is about not being in control, cooperating rather than control, and now you're talking about control. So help me.
Sure. Good catch. Um, you know, I think there's two different senses of the word that I'm using. One has to do with inappropriately managing,
Hmm.
um, and the other has to do with just an appropriate use of our will.
Hmm.
You know, we can, intend, we can do
Yeah,
something on purpose.
yeah, yeah. That's good. And there's a difference between leading indicators and lagging indicators, and
Mhm.
goals tend to be related to
Mhm.
lagging indicators. And you're talking about leading it. I know what I can do right this minute, and I
Right.
have some control over that.
Mm,
But I love this idea that intention is something that I can enjoy all the way through. And if I want to be welcoming, I can do that right this minute.
right. Yeah. You can control how you are being, or you can intend, you can connect with how you are being. Um, and that is always going to move the needle more than trying to make sure you're doing the right thing.
Mm, great. Um, you you made kind of an offhand remark that I want some clarification on. You said something along the lines of intention helps us slip past the how.
Yeah. Right.
I want to know what you mean by that. And by the way, that's not quite fair because you said it that was on a list of 3 or 4 things that it helps us slip past, but it was the how
Hmm.
that kind of got me a little
Yeah.
curious.
Have you ever not begun something because you didn't know how you were going to do it?
Sure.
Yeah. Same. Um, that stymies a lot of creatives I've worked with. Um, and the truth is, we don't actually know the how. We can sometimes think we know, and sometimes we're
Yeah.
perfectly right, especially if it's something we've done before. Um, but if we're clear on it's like the why. We can just say the why. If we're clear on the why, then we know the next right thing. If we
Yeah.
know, my intention is to connect with my neighbor. I don't know how I'm going to build a long-term relationship with my neighbor, but I like
Mhm.
my intention is to have them feel welcomed. Okay, then you know the next right thing, but you don't have to know the next year.
Yeah.
And then you're free to act.
You're driving by your headlights. You can see to the next curve, but you can't see beyond that. And then once you make that curve, you can see to the next curve.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's good. Um, okay. I know we need to be moving toward a landing, but I want to talk about the idea that you say only products and objects can really suffer from failing a standard, not a maker.
Hmm.
And we're so afraid that if we make something that's not up to snuff, then that somehow, shows that we're not up to snuff. You said a maker has always gained from the process,
Right.
even if the product is not. And by the way, the product is never what. There's always friction that keeps the end product, from being what I had imagined at the beginning,
Always. Yep.
which that's okay too. I mean, you,
Yeah.
let me just say this. But it's true that the end result is not what I pictured at the beginning. It's
Mhm.
also true that there are things about the end result that I could have never foreseen, and that
Yeah.
you can't know until you wade into it.
Mm.
As I
Yeah.
engage in the process, as I'm present with the process.
Like, thank goodness. Otherwise, why would you do it?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah. So now I forgot what the original. Oh yeah, we're talking about this
right.
idea that it's true. A product can fail a standard,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you have to somehow separate yourself from the product.
And yeah, and I don't consider what it is what we make to be products in the sense that I'm using that word.
Hmm.
I mean it as, something that we do solely to check a box, something we don't have a relationship to, can exist, and fail to meet some hypothetical use it had because it's based on use. But the things but our process is not, we don't participate in it because it's useful. We participate in it because it is just part of being alive, and we like to do it on purpose. And I think that's true with our efforts. Our efforts can hypothetically not meet some idea we had of what use they would serve, but they exist and are doing something else. What is most interesting to me is who we become in the process. And if we're paying close attention to that, then it becomes really rich material. And maybe we feel the sting of disappointment at first, and that's totally understandable. But if we become really curious about what it is that happened, then we can only become more whole and more ourselves through our effort.
Do you do anything? Do you make anything that you make badly?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Do you participate in any art form that you are not good at?
I love to sew. Yeah, I love to sew clothing and various things around the house, and it requires a level of precision that is not natural to me.
Yeah.
But it's so satisfying because of the tactile nature of it. I mean, so much of my work is in the mind, and just intangible. So yeah.
I love it when grown-ups do stuff they're not good at.
Right.
We're not called upon to do stuff that we're not good at very often.
Oh,
well,
my
I take
goodness.
that back. There are sort of relational things that you're not good at that you just got to do because you've got a child.
Yeah, exactly.
and that child can't get it from anybody else but you. And so, sorry if you're not good at it.
It's a great example. Yes. They're always kind of pushing at our edge of competence.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I think mine are pushing way beyond the edge of my competence. Yeah. Okay. All right. This has got to be the last question, except my very last question. When I saw the title of your book, Making Time, that didn't exactly sit well with me. Again, only God can make a tomato. Only God can make time.
Yes.
I can't make time. Defend yourself.
Yeah.
What do you mean when you talk about making time?
Yeah, like it's a bit of a wink, right? Because when we hear that phrase, we think you got to make time for what you care about, and we think about like managing things better. And so it's a bit of a play on the idea that, I mean, there's such a thing as making time, which is a way that we are being with our time. And when you are participating in time, as opposed to trying to hyper manage, then it just takes on a different quality. Now, this isn't a perfectionistic thing. We are going to have times where we're managing and we're squeezing and we're acting like producers about our calendar. But if we know that our life is an ongoing participation in creation, then our experience of it is different. So that is what the title is sort of slyly referring to.
All right, last question. Really is the last question. Who are the writers who make you want to write?
Ooh, yeah. I think Annie Dillard was the first one that made me think, you can do that? I think that's a lovely permission slip. And James Baldwin and these days Octavia Butler is really making me want to write.
I've never actually read Octavia Butler. I don't read science fiction really.
I'm not a science fiction person either, but I would highly
I just hear she's
recommend.
fantastic, in that area.
Yes. The Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents are not even super science fiction-y, so that's where I started. And they're set in 2024, even though they were written in the 90s, and it's eerie in its prescience. So I would recommend.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful. Like I said, the fact that she's known as a science fiction writer makes me think, there's a whole lot of other things. I've got a long list that doesn't, before I get to any science fiction. So,
yeah, I get that.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Maria Bowler. This has been so fun. And I hope a lot of people read your book and benefit from it.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.